Hey everyone, it's Sleepy Reader, aka Damien. I am here working on my short stack of 6 new comics I got this past New Comic Book Day, Wednesday. And it's a late Sunday night, so I guess I'm a bit fuzzy in the brain. But I'm going to do my usual countdown, ranking them from number 6 down to number 1 in terms of just how I felt as I read them and what appealed to me most in my reading experience. And it's interesting. I realized that one of the good things about doing these reviews on YouTube, or comic book thoughts as I prefer to call them on YouTube, is it keeps me on top of my reading a bit. I am normally just a butterfly that floats from book to book. I have so many science fiction novels that I read part of but never finished because I got distracted by something else. I wanted to finish all of those. It's not like I purposefully leave things unfinished in my reading. So this kind of thing gives me that much more of an impetus to keep up. And then and as a result, I think over the long haul, I'm enjoying what I'm reading more by keeping up with it and not giving in to my butterfly tendencies. So anyway, I don't look much like a butterfly, but I am as a reader. But so in at number 6 was quite a fat new number 1 from Image Comics from Scott Snyder and Tony S. Daniel and Tomu Moray, the colorist. The first issue of Noctera, Night Earth, I guess you could call it. And right away, that cover doesn't appeal to me a lot. I've liked Tony Daniels here and there, and other times not. And I think my first reaction was that his art kind of made this a harder book to get into. But I think that Scott Snyder, for all the comics experience he has, he had a bit of trouble kind of getting this world going and how to tell it in a fluid story that would suck readers in. And it did kind of an okay job. I think this was an example of a book that if I didn't tell myself, I want to include it in my video this week, I might have just read half of it and put it down and never got back to it. I'm glad I did get back to it because it did prove to be more interesting right at the end. I guess I shouldn't show you that ending. But the antagonist shows up at the end and is quite intriguing. The situation, it's another post-apocalyptic book, and the situation is a slight variation on anything I've ever seen before. It's not quite anything else I've ever seen before, where the world turns to night. Whether there's going to be any kind of explanation for that. People aren't freezing to death, as if the sun had gone out or something along those lines. But monsters are coming out, so it's kind of a fantasy situation. If you are in the darkness for too long, you will turn into a monster. So people have to be under artificial light all the time. So it's kind of an interesting setup. And so maybe once they get going and they have this interesting antagonist and some other interesting things, it may become a more riveting book than it was in the first issue. So it wasn't on my pull list, I don't think. It was just something I picked up off the rack. And so it may or may not be something I pick up off the rack again. Obviously, this was a very slow week for me. So, yeah, it's okay. So that was at number 6. I guess I had a better time reading Berserker than Noctera. At least I flowed right through it. This is also another hugely oversized first issue. They did charge an extra $1 for this one. And it's the infamous or famous new Keanu Reeves comic book, which no doubt will be a movie series eventually. The character is drawn to look like Keanu Reeves. I never can say his first name that well. Kino. Anyway, and it's got an excellent at least on paper, team working with him, with Mr. Reeves. It's Matt Kint is the co-writer. Ron Gardney, one of my favorite current artists, is doing the line art. And then top-notch colorist Bill Crabtree doing the colors. And the colors are fantastic. The art is fantastic, too. This issue, anyway, is kind of just blow by blow, Keanu Reeves, or the Berserker character, killing and tearing apart people for the government on some secret mission. And there's hints throughout that there's something unusual about him, and we see that more and more as he gets, blown up and torn up and keeps going. Nothing can apparently kill him. And I guess I will not say what is revealed right at the end, although it was not much of a surprise to me. So I just felt because it's so well drawn and so well colored, I was pulled through it, but at the same time I was just kind of bored of punching, gouging, pulling, ripping, blood stuff. It was action that had no meaning. I didn't care about it, and I sensed enough of the concept to feel like I was reading something incredibly familiar, from Bloodshot to Deathlock to the Eternal Warrior to all these other things about people who are tools of destruction that the government or some agency sends out to do their bidding. And so it's going to be a fun enough read, but it feels like nothing special so far, despite the sort of A team on the art and potentially on the writing. We can't really see much sign of this being a Matt Kint book. So I think of him probably as more of an assistant to Keanu Reeves to help him with maybe the pacing or the structuring of his ideas. So it's the best-selling book of the year. So I guess in that way one might feel like you ought to read it, but I feel if you haven't got this comic, you haven't missed out on anything. So that was number 5. In at number 4, I'll put The Dreaming Waking Hours, number 8. I loved this book, I think, for the first 5 issues, was it? Then 6 and 7 were like a interlude almost. And the original artist, I think, is back, and colorist, and it's a little more interesting than the interlude, but it's definitely lost its steam or its emotional appeal to me. So it's sadly not. I keep thinking it's going to be one of my favorite books, but I enjoyed reading it. It's a good thing. It's a good solid, set in the world of Neil Gaiman's dreaming kind of book, as you would expect it to be. But I don't know, just didn't hit me as strongly. Getting much better at number 3 is Engine Word, and this is issue, where'd the number go? Issue 8. And I understand there's going to be 12 issues. This is, wins the best cover of the. Almost any week that Engine Word comes out, it wins the best cover. They always do these kind of covers. This is the Aquarius character. So the previous issue took a narrative technique that really threw me out of the book and left me feeling wanting a bit. But this is back to more normal storytelling, and it was pretty strong. And all the different nefarious pieces of the culture and these what do you call them? These astrological sign based sort of dictators of this human colony on an alien planet. All these different intrigues and stuff advance very nicely in this issue. And so I was pretty happy reading it and had a good time. Let's put that at number 3. I kind of feel hesitant on where, in terms of especially talking to other people, depending on the issue, my opinion of this changes. So I was quite happy with it this issue, not so happy last issue. And so it remains to be seen whether I really recommend this series until we get to the end, and whether it pulls things together or falls flat. So then my penultimate book here, number 2, is a trickier one to talk about. It's Heavy Metal, number 304. And I really had struggled to get through Heavy Metal, and I have been sort of I've been maybe getting the last 4 or 5 Heavy Metal issues and putting them aside and not really reading them, flipping through them. And there's too much material in here. It's about 145 pages and lots of shorter stories or parts of shorter stories. And as you flip through it, the art's nice, but like nothing in general that totally like goes, oh, I've got to read that story right now. It was interesting, though, when I realized one of these stories has art by Livio Ramondelli, who worked on one of my favorite 2020 books, Kill Lock. And he illustrates a story written by someone else, but it's a nice little twist on the old science fiction trope of some company that can change your memories or erase your memories for you, the memories you don't want to remember, as a form of therapy. And so as I was saying, it took me a while to read all of this. I think there's actually 1 or 2 stories in here that I still haven't read. I went back for some of these and read the earlier parts when they were the serialized stories, but there's a few that I did not go all the way back for. There was like this heartwarming story about a woman, sort of space truck driver, and her robot child that I really appreciated once I read it. But the art just had a way of not initially grabbing me. It's almost like a lot of this art has a nice surfacey feel, but it doesn't draw me past the surface. So I'll flip through the magazine, but not be tempted to actually read the story. I mean, that's not an ugly picture or anything. And I wonder if it's something about coloring styles, even, in part at least. Although the line art might also be, partially at fault, or the layouts or something. But as I said, once I dug into it, it's a pretty good story. One story that did have art that drew me in right away was more like a old school Heavy Metal piece, in the sense that it kind of was it was more of a riff than a real story about a soldier that just allowed the artist to do some cool stuff. And I was told on another live hangout I was on that this is actually a reprint. This is a European piece from a Croatian, I think it was Croatian artist that this piece was originally published in Europe in the 80s. So that was interesting. The other interesting thing is that there's two pieces in here with art by Bart Sears, a once sought-after cartoonist, or mainstream superhero comic artist that I had thought was completely gone from the scene, but here he is doing kind of wild and crazy stuff here at Heavy Metal. And this one story by him is an ongoing story that I had to go back 3 issues to fully read. So it's not like, well, there was one story that wowed me a bit. Other than that, it was more incremental. Like incrementally, as I read along, I was like, oh, that's not so bad, and oh, here's something real clever, and it kind of built up. And once I forced myself kind of to dig into Heavy Metal, I had a good time. Forced good time. But there was this one called I hate folding over, but I don't, hopefully not hurting, but the Last Detective Redemption, and it's a 2-parter. So the first part started in the previous issue, 303. Do they list it's a whole group of creators: Claudio Alvarez, writing, Geraldo Borges, drawing, colorist Arthur Halsey. And I think this is one in which the colors kind of, gave it that surfacey effect. And the art is competent but not spectacular. But as I dug into the story, I really liked it. It was a really good version of the old film noir kind of detective story set in a science fiction setting. That's kind of a core comic book kind of thing, starting in the 80s and on. And it involved robots and humans and some future Latin American setting, and it really sucked me in once I got going on it. But yeah, I think the problem is the coloring. That made it hard for me to approach at first. So that was the standout. Although just before it is another one of those artists does a cool little riff on an idea, a 2-page story that I really liked. Who's this artist though? Story and art by Benton Jew, Jew. That's an unusual last name. But yeah, so that was a fun little joke on bacterial growth, you might say. So I thought I was gonna, when I started this, I thought I was gonna decide to drop heavy metal from my pull list. It's expensive. It is cheaper page by page, but it's a big chunk of money every month. But I'm gonna stick with it for a while longer. And then the comic that really had no problem being at the top of this little heap, coming in at number 1, is Resonant number 8. And I guess there's only 2 more issues, and I'm really sad about that. But other than that, this comic keeps on giving with lots of great ideas. It's post-apocalyptic again, but with a twist. Maybe it's a bit like Crossed or something, in the sense that there's something that makes people become brutal and violent for an hour or two whenever this wave of whatever it is, psychic waves spread through the world. And so it's devastated the world and destroyed a lot. And this is a very moving story about a family and the father getting separated from the children, and what's going on with the children, what's going on with the father. And I kind of thought it was played out. Like, now we just have to have the adventure of the father finding his way back to the kids while the kids struggle to survive. But the father's adventures take these unusual twists where he comes across, we're only 2 more issues left, and he comes across this whole society that supposedly is not affected by these waves of psychosis because of its special location and the special building they're in, and the fact that they're a society that gives way to their urges in some surprising ways. I guess I don't want to give away too much more. So yeah, they managed in issue 8 to continue to surprise me and make little twists and keep up the tension and the imaginative stuff and the beautiful art, the incredible colors. I think this one is the line artist is very good, but this comic is blessed with an incredible colorist who just makes you want to read it. We talk about that. You're flipping through it. You flip through this, and you just want to get in. You just want to be part of this comic and dive right in. But obviously the writer and the line artist are doing a good job too, bringing us deep into it. So I did see the writer and artist interviewed on the Bruce and Stephanie comic book channel, and they said the writer did mention is scheduled to end with issue 10, but he does have another 5-issue story in the back of his mind if he ever gets a chance. So hopefully he will get a chance to do that, because I would love to have some more Resonant. Yeah, so there we go. Maybe I'll put a link to Bruce and Stephanie's channel down below. I don't know if everyone has checked them out. At this point, more than anything else, they do their comics and beer show every Friday night, which is it Friday night? Yeah, every Friday night, which is really fun if you can catch it. I always can watch a little bit of it, but not all of it, because for me, it's just at 7:00 at night on a Friday evening, which is still family time most evenings. And also, there is someone who was doing comic book reviews back when I first started on YouTube who has made a big comeback, and that is Minutia Minute. So I'll put a link to Minutia Minute down below, and he's a really good comic book reviewer. He seems to focus mostly on DC Comics. I mean, I don't know where he is. It's been years since he's done comic book reviews, but he started out in his comeback doing a lot of Batman and other DC Comics. He's taking a close look at the new DC reboot or whatever it is, which I'm kind of taking a pass on for the moment. But I highly recommend Minutia Minute for anyone who likes comic book reviews. So I'll link to him down below also.